I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make chocolate croissants, and this is what they look like. As you can see, they have a beautiful golden brown outside crust, and when these are freshly made, that crust is wonderfully crisp and flaky. And then inside you have a honeycomb design with a nice big piece of chocolate. So to make a croissant dough, I am just doing it by hand. So you just have a large bowl. We'll start, and I always like to weigh my ingredients. I find it easier actually and more accurate. So this is time to buy a scale. But I'll give you cup measurements as well. So you will need 475 grams, which is 3 2/3 cups of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. And to that, I'm going to add 6 grams, which is 1 3/4 teaspoons of SAF Gold Instant Yeast. Instant yeast is used by professionals, and you get a really good rise from doughs like this that have a long fermentation period. And what's also really great is you do not have to proof your yeast before you add it to your ingredients. So now it's easy to order it at lots of places online. But if you want to use active dry yeast, you will need 10 grams, 2.5 teaspoons, and you will have to activate your active dry yeast in the water before you add it. And the other ingredient I'm going to use, it's maybe a little different, is 2 grams, which is 2/3 of a teaspoon of dry malt diastatic powder. And that helps with browning. And the other thing too is, again, when you have doughs with a long fermentation period, what the dry malt powder does is it breaks down the starch in the ingredient into sugar, which the yeast can feed on during the fermentation. So again, you will get a really good rise from your croissant, plus it helps with browning. And then you will need 65 grams, which is 1/3 of a cup of granulated white sugar. So then I'm just going to stir that together. And next you will need 10 grams, which is 2.5 teaspoons of salt. Now I did mix my yeast into my dry ingredients because yeast does not really like salt. So I want to get that yeast mixed in, and then now I'll mix my salt in. And the next thing you will need is 25 grams, which is 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and just cut it into like little pieces like this. And then I'm just going to work the butter into the dry ingredients just until they get little pieces, like little crumbs. I'm just doing this by hand. It's not very hard. Now, this isn't a lot of butter, but believe me, we will be using butter because, as you probably know, a croissant dough is a laminated dough, so we will have a layer of butter in there later, which we will do. So just work that in. And then for our wet ingredients, you will need 240 grams, which is 1 cup of water, and have that at room temperature, which is about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 24 C. And you will also need 30 grams, which is 3 tablespoons of a cream. You can use, it's for richness. So you can use a heavy cream, a light cream. You can even use half and half. So what I did is just make a well in the center, pour in my water and my cream. And then I'm using one of these just plastic bench scrapers. I guess that's what you call them. Really good tool. You could use a wooden spoon. You could just use a regular spatula. And I'm just working the flour into the liquid. I mean, you could use a mixer, but this is not difficult to do, so just get that moistened. We're not really going to need this dough very much. We're just making sure that all the dry ingredients are moistened. So I'm just going to get my fingers right in there and work that in. It won't be a smooth mass of dough when we're finished here. It's kind of a scraggly mess, but don't worry, once we start rolling this dough, it'll get nice and smooth. So what do you want to make? You want to make sure that all of your flour and all that is moistened. So now what we're going to do, once that's done, which it looks good, is we're going to let this sit at room temperature for about an hour. And again, room temperature is about 75, maybe up to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, 24, 26 C. And we're going to let the dough ferment, and that helps to develop the flavor. So, I mean, that's what it looks like, kind of. It's not perfect, but don't worry about it. So just cover it with some plastic wrap and let it sit on the counter for an hour, and I'll see you back here in a minute. So it's been an hour. So now what we're going to do is roll out our dough. You will need to have a baking sheet just dusted with some flour, and dust your surface with some flour. And then just gonna like so. And again, dust the top. You probably, it's quite sticky, so you might have to move it around a lot, dust it with more flour if you need to. And what we're going to do is roll it into a 14 by 10 inch, which is 35 by 25 centimeter rectangle. It's a nice soft dough at this point. So you will have to have a handy ruler, yardstick, whatever. So just keep moving it around. And if you don't want to use a rolling pin, I mean, you just could use your fingers to form this. It's have to, but I find the rolling pin is the easiest way. Kind of run your hands over it as you're working. You want it to be an even thickness. So just roll it or stretch it a little, and then just keep lifting it up and putting it down. So what happens is you stretch it out, and then if you lift it up and kind of flap it down, kind of shrinks a little. That's what. So it's almost. Well, we're almost there. And then what we're going to do is just put this on our baking sheet, dust it with a little flour, and then we're going to put it in the refrigerator. That's about right, yeah. We're going to put it in the refrigerator. A minimum, try to get it, you want it at that exact size. I know I hate to be exact, but with this you do want to be. And then just put a little flour on the top and cover it with some plastic wrap and put it into the refrigerator. Now you want it at least 6 hours, or you can do it overnight, whichever, the time frame, how it works for you. And the reason we do this is, one is to let that dough relax, and then we want it to get really cold and firm, because a croissant dough is a laminated dough, which means you have 2 layers of dough and with a layer of butter in between. And this is a dough, we're going to wrap the butter around. And what you want to have is the temperature of your dough as cold as your butter. So that's why we're putting it in the fridge and getting it nice and cold and nice and firm. So, like I said, at least 6 hours, or if you want to do this part one day and then let it sit overnight, and then we'll pick it up, and you can pick it up in the morning, whichever works for you. So when we come back, we will start with our butter layer. So our dough has now chilled sufficiently, so we're going to start our butter layer. The first thing I like to do is to take a sheet of parchment paper, because we have to form the butter into a certain size. So I take a piece of parchment paper, and then I've just drawn a line 10 inches long and 7 inches wide, which is 25 by 18 centimeters. And then once you've drawn your line, just flip your parchment paper over. So for our butter, you need 225 grams, which is 1 cup of cold, unsalted butter. Now, you want to use a higher fat butter for this, if possible, because that will make our croissants even more flaky and buttery flavor. And this higher fat butter is usually at least 83% butter fat, is usually called either cultured, or if you live in the States, we call it European style butter. So then what I do is I take the butter and just cut it into 6 pieces, and then just kind of put it like so. And you want it cold, as I said. Just kind of space it out there. And we're going to pound the butter. So I just take it like that within the square, put that over, and then we take our rolling pin and we're going to bang. A little noisy here. And then just going to pound that just a little more noise. Okay, so I've got it softened a little. So then what I do, I'm just going to move this, just even it out a little. What I'm going to do is fold my paper so I have it at that 7 by 10 inches. There's a reason for this. It may seem complicated, but it does make it easier in the end. So I kind of got that, and then I'm just going to flip this over like so. And then what I'm going to do is roll the butter within that rectangle, and you want to make sure that your butter layer is even thickness. So just press down and roll. Okay, so I do have it within that triangle or rectangle, and just run your hand over it to make sure it's of even thickness, and then just use your rolling pin to even it out. So what we want is our butter to be cold but still pliable. So mine's pretty good. You can see it bends a little, but it's still, I think it's a little soft. So at this point, I'm just going to put this back in the fridge for about 15 minutes, or you could pop it into the freezer for less time. And then when we come back, we're going to laminate our dough. So now we're going to laminate our dough. You've got to butter, peel back the parchment paper. We have our chilled dough. So just take that and put it right in the center. You see now why we measured everything, because the butter has to fit perfectly to the center of our croissant dough. So just peel that off. And then, so put that in the center, and then just take the ends and wrap it around that butter. And then just kind of seal the edges. You want the butter right to the edge. You can see right to the edge of your dough, so just kind of play with it there. Now, when you're working with this dough, temperature is so important because that is what it will, you know, if your butter gets too soft, that will affect the croissant, the texture and all that. So it is best, okay, it's best to work in a cold kitchen. By that I mean 73 to 75 degrees, which is what I think 23, 24 C. If at any time you find your butter getting too soft, stop and then just put it back, your dough back on your baking sheet into the fridge until that butter firms up. Now, I live in a hot climate, and even though I have the air on, I have my granite and it does get warm. So what I have come up with, you may wonder why I have a pot. And I put this pot in the freezer, get it really cold. You could use an ice pack. And then what I do is I rub it over my counter to get it cold. I find otherwise, you know, where I live, it just gets too hot in here. My dough gets soft, and you don't want that. So again, if at any time you find your butter getting too soft, stop. This is a labor of love, croissants, and if it takes a little longer, then it takes a little longer. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to roll this out into, width is not so important here. What we want is length. And we want 22 inches long. And I think that's 55 centimeters. I do have in the written instructions, but I believe, should check that. But anyway, so flour your counter and keep flouring and moving the dough as you go. Flour the top. And then just seal those edges. We're looking at about 8 inches, 20 centimeters wide. But that, you know, don't worry so much about the width, it's the length. So what I'm going to do is just tap that. And we are going to do this process 3 times. And that is going to give us all those wonderful buttery layers. I think that equals 81 layers, I think, something like that. So now roll, center outwards. We want to keep the thickness the same. You want to work, as I said, pretty quickly because, well, I have to because my counter warms up pretty fast. So, and what you want to do is, you know, if you have this bench scraper, you want to move that dough. Kind of lift it up and flap it down because it will stretch, and we want to let it shrink and then keep stretching. Now, if you see, you can get a yardstick, but if you see, I've just put tape, masking tape, to tell me at the 22 inches. You can just use a ruler, yardstick, but I hate getting my ruler out, so I just put those. And I find that makes it easy. Now, kind of, you know, you can even up your edges as you go. Flap that dough, I guess that's what you call it. So that looks pretty good. Even that out a bit. If it's a little longer, don't worry. You just don't want it. You want it. If your dough is too thick, that's one of the reasons. If you notice croissants that don't have that honeycomb design and they're kind of like a thick layer of dough all the way around, sometimes that's because your dough, you didn't roll it out thin enough. So I'm about there. So this is our first fold. So you take I'm taking the top, fold it into the center, thirds, kind of like your an envelope, you know, a letter that you're folding the letter. So about there, take this, fold it up over, and then you want it, see, you want it even. And that is our first turn. So then what I do is I turn it, and you got to turn 9 degrees. So I turn it so that this, it's like I call it like a book binding, is on my left side. Now I'm going to roll it again. My dough is not that warm. if you found it's really soft, then cover it and refrigerate it before you do the second turn. So this is, again, we're doing the same length, same width. Okay, that's our second. I got it out to the required length. Looks about good. So again, fold down a third, brush off. You can take a pastry brush, just brush off any excess flour. Kind of even it up there. Take this, fold it up, and put that just down. Okay, you want that even, looks good. And that is our second turn. Now, it's soft. I am going to let it rest. You have to do the same process one more time. So I'm just going to take this, flour the bottom of your sheet pan, just even that up. A little flour on top, cover it, and refrigerate it for an hour. And then we come back, we're going to do our third and final turn. Okay, so it's been an hour. We're going to do our final roll. Again, have that fold side on the left, and then flour your counter, flour the top. I did, again, take my pot and rub it over the surface to cool things off, and roll this way, not this way. End to end here, and again, same as before. Okay, so we're at about 22 inches, 55 centimeters. It's about 8 inches wide, 20 centimeters. And now, again, our final fold here. Third. And so now what we're going to do, again, flour your baking sheet. Put this on. We're going to cover and refrigerate it again for an hour. That'll let the dough relax and firm up. Okay, so now the next step. We've done our rolling and folding. So now what we're going to do is get our croissant dough into the required length and width to form our croissants. I do this in 2 stages. That way, because your dough, you stretch it and then you kind of want to let it relax a little, and then we'll stretch it a little more, roll it a little more. So again, flour your surface. So what we're going to do first is, I like to do it at about the 16-inch length and about 9 inches wide, which is 40 by 23 centimeters. And so just roll as before, from the center outwards. Okay, so we're at the desired length. I did change my tape to do it that way, but we have to also make it a little wider, because right now I'm at about 8 inches, 20 centimeters. I want to go to 9. So just turn my dough and I'm just going to roll this way to 9 inches. Check that, that looks about right. So I'm just going to I'm going to put it back on my baking sheet, cover it, and refrigerate it. You want to let it relax a bit. 30, I usually do it 60 minutes, and when we come back, we will form our croissants. Okay, so now we are ready to cut out our chocolate croissants. I didn't mention, but at this point, I just chilled it for about an hour. If you wanted to, you could leave it at this point and chill it overnight if that works better with when you want to bake them off. So now what we're going to do is we're going to roll this into a 18-inch long by 12-inch wide, which is 45 by 30 centimeters. I find I get, if I roll it properly, I will get about 10 chocolate croissants from this dough. And we're going to roll as always. Just roll it a bit and then lift it up, you know, because it does shrink a little, lift it up. And if you have to flour more, do that. Now I did do my tape with the 18 inches, the 45, which I'm almost there. I'll give myself like just a little extra in case it shrinks back, which it always seems to do. Between when I'm doing it and when I'm cutting it, I seem to lose a little. So. And if you find at any point, like I've said in the past, if your dough gets too warm, put it back into the refrigerator to chill up a little more. I'm going to just flour that just a little. And we're ready. So, yeah, that's about right. So now I'm just going to trim this edge just a little with my pizza wheel. You could use the sharp knife. A nice straight edge there. Same with this. Handy little tool, this pizza wheel for this. And then we are going to cut out our croissants. Each croissant is going to be about 3.5 inches this way by 6 inches, which is 9 by 15. I actually made my little, like, if you watch the regular croissant, I made a little template. I did this again with this out of just some plastic. I have a little plastic cutting board. So I'm just going to, and there I can eyeball that. So, and then what we're going to do, oh, I should go this way, do this in half. Okay, cut all the way through. And then I'm going to show you my first one. This one. So there we have our, now you will need, depending on how chocolatey do you want your chocolate croissants? I have these little they are actually made to make chocolate croissants. They're called chocolate batons, and they're about the length that we want. You don't have to buy these. 2 of these, I'm going to put 2 of these in one. That is about 11 grams, which is about 1/4 ounce. You could just take a chocolate bar. I mean, I think you could take chocolate chips and just cut it, so you know you want it to go like that, almost right across. So you could cut a nice chocolate bar, chocolate chunks, chocolate chips. So what I'm doing is putting it in, you know, maybe what's that, about 1/2 inch, about what, 1.5 centimeters. And then what I do is I just wrap the dough around that, and then just put the other one in there, and then just roll it up like so. And that is a chocolate croissant. It's a little easier to make than the regular croissants. And then what I do, I just have 2 baking sheets lined with parchment, or you could just like butter them. And then make sure this edge is on the bottom, because what we don't want is, as these bake, to then unwrap. And then we're just going to carry on cutting and doing the same thing. Put one in there like so. I mean, if you wanted even more chocolate, you could just put more chocolate. And you could use it like semi-sweet, you could use a milk chocolate, bittersweet chocolate, whatever you want. So that's how we do chocolate croissants. So I'm just going to keep cutting them and rolling them up. Okay, so we've rolled all our chocolate croissants. So now what we want to do, we are going to have to proof these. So what I have, but we're going to brush them with an egg wash We're going to actually do it twice, once now and then once before we put them in the oven. We're doing it now because that will keep them moist while they're proofing. So in a bowl I have 1 large egg plus 2 large egg yolks. So that's 55 grams for the egg out of the shell, and 2 large egg yolks, about 35 grams. And have your eggs at room temperature. And I'm just going to whisk them. This will make the croissants really nice golden brown and shiny, the egg wash. So there we go. And then I just have a pastry brush, and we are going to brush the tops and the sides lightly with egg wash. You don't do the ends, just the top and the sides. Okay, that's good. So now we want to proof these until they're nice and they rise a bit, not double. They rise, and then when you touch them, they'll be nice and soft. I find that takes usually close to 2 hours. You want to proof them at room temperature. By that I mean about 75 to 70, no more than 78 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 24, 26 C. And the reason is, like, sometimes bread, you could proof it a little higher than that, but for this you don't want to, because we do not want that butter to get soft in the croissant dough. So that's the temperature you need. You know, when you get close to the point where we're going to bake them, you want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 200 degrees Celsius. And because we're going to bake both sheets at a time, have your oven racks in the top and bottom third of your oven. Now you want to cover your croissants because we don't want to dry out. I just take a kitchen bag and just put each sheet in that kitchen bag. Or, you know, if you had one of those large clear kind of tubs, plastic tubs, you just turn it upside down on there. Of course, try not to get it into a draft. And so I'll let them proof, and when we come back, we will bake them off. Okay, so we're now ready to bake our chocolate croissants. So just brush them one more time with the egg wash, and then we're going to bake them at the 400 degree Fahrenheit, 200 degree Celsius for 10 minutes. Then at that point, rotate your baking sheets top to bottom, front to back, and then reduce your oven temperature to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 109 degrees Celsius, and bake them for an additional, like maybe 8-10 minutes, just until they're golden brown. So our chocolate croissants are now done. Don't they look gorgeous? Beautiful golden brown color, nice and shiny. And of course now we want to let them cool a little before we try one. Now I did mess up on some, and I'm going to show you, and so you will know what not to do next when you make them. And we can see, but when I told you when you roll them up and put them on your baking sheet to proof them, make sure that that seam is on the bottom. And obviously, 2 of them, I did not do that. So they did kind of unwrap as they baked. Still taste good. I guess they're from Rick and I will give the rest away. But just a little tip so you'll know not to do that. So I'm just going to let these cool a little, and then when we come back, we're going to try one. So now we'll try one. Now, chocolate croissants, or really any croissants, as you probably know, are best the day they're made, freshly made, because that's when that outside crust is so wonderfully crisp. You could store them overnight, but that outside crust tends to soften. They're still good, but just keep that in mind, that really the day they're made is when they're the best. So try a little, oh, see that These are still really hot still, but you can just see the chocolate in there. Oh, very nice. The outside, like I said, is so buttery and crisp and flaky. And then when you go inside, the interior is soft, but then you get that really nice kind of jolt, I guess you would say, of chocolate. Because I used like a really semi-sweet chocolate, so it's almost to the bittersweet, so it's got a little bit of a bite, which I like to offset that buttery richness of the croissant. So try them. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.